Hi guys, it's Janae and welcome back to my channel. And today we are, wait, hold on, okay, sorry, welcome back to my channel, sorry about that. And today we're continuing the read along for ErHa volume 8. I am still nervous, that hasn't changed. I do not have tissues, which might be a mistake just because we were safe, relatively safe, in the previous live stream. It does not mean I should get comfortable and let my guard down, but yeah. Also, we are in a new location, well, old location. I vacated this location during the winter because it was too cold and very close to the window, which made it even colder. And yeah, today we're here because I have reasons why I can't move the table to where I would usually have it, and I need the lights because my dad is working on our house's electricity, which means that things might go a little bit dim at some point in this, and I'm just hoping that the natural light will balance it out for as long as needed. We'll see how this goes. I'm a little bit nervous. Hi, I'm doing well, thank you. And you? Um, in a chair, yes. Like a sophisticated person. Unlike usual. uh, but yeah, I have my coffee here with me. We're doing 2 hours as is currently usual with this novel specifically. And I was doing kind of like the maths to try and figure out how many more live streams we were gonna be needing before we get through this, and it's not looking good. I'm going very slowly because of how stressful this novel is. It's definitely taking me a little bit longer to read through this than usual, and I say this because I am going on holiday middle October, I believe, which means that we're either taking a week off or I have to pre-record that session. So I need to hear from you guys what you would prefer. Would you prefer I wait so that all of these are live? That, barring the chance that maybe this gets so traumatic that I decide to just take it offline in any case. But either this all be live, so I wait and just not have a live during the time that I'm away, or pre-record so that you guys still have a stream to come to that week while I'm gone. Have you finished watching Kill to Love? No, the copyright on that has been uh, unpleasant to deal with. I'm waiting for them to come back to me, but I suspect that unfortunately I'm probably gonna have to do it as a Patreon exclusive show on the early Ermines tier. It is currently up on the poll and doing very well, so it's very likely to win. But yeah, hi, and then yeah, take my time reading ErHa. I indeed am, and not necessarily willingly all of it. Also, I apologize because since we're closer to the window and it is like rush hour, there is gonna be a bit more noise than usual, which is not ideal. Still haven't come back to you. It is unfortunate, but I think what's just frustrating is when it's so unpredictable. Like there's no standardization of when people are allowed to copyright claim versus when not. So if YouTube could figure something out with that, that would have been great, but we just make do. Okay. So for anyone who wants to follow along, we're on page 123, Missing You. Also, I feel like the mic is a little bit far away, but hopefully I'm still being picked up. Okay. I hope you guys are ready, because I am not. Shmei fell silent. His fair cheek twitched as if he'd just been slapped. At last, he pursed his lips, then said, "You're determined not to leave me the slightest bit of dignity." He reached for Chuaning's jaw again, but this time Chuaning flinched away like he felt the touch of a snake. Shmei's eyes narrowed. His face clouded over. And a second later, he'd rearranged his features into a mask of serenity. "Enough," he said, his countenance gentle as ever. "You've always been hard-headed. In the past life, you intended to kill him, did you not? But in the end, you couldn't bear to. Just before you died, you even transferred your broken soul into his heart." Shmei really knows how to hit where it hurts, and I hate him for it. He was correct. During that terrible final battle in snowy Kunlun, when Chuaning had touched Moran's forehead for the last time, he channeled the fractured remnants of his soul into Moran's body. By the end of his previous lifetime, his souls had been splintered and separated from each other. He had left one fragment in the body of the teenage Moran and given another to his slumbering other self. He'd taken everything that remained, along with his final precarious hopes, and bequeathed it all to Emperor Jin. See, this is something that I had been wondering about for quite a while, and at this point I can't say if it was something that I authentically had as a thought when we were in the underworld, or if I feel like I had that thought now in hindsight. But that when when Moran's soul was measured for its goodness, whether or not that had something to do with Chuaning's influence on him, and not in the like him becoming a better person sense, but in the there is some part of Chuaning in him that is making the thing go weird, you know? Chuaning hadn't known what effect this might have on the Flower of Eightfold Sorrows in its third stage of development, but he knew the Gu flower received its first nourishment from the soul of its spellcaster. If he channeled his own souls into it, perhaps something would change. At that point, he was no more than an empty, battered shell. He'd exhausted his strength doing all that he could, all that he had to do. He had always been iron-willed and decisive. Moran was his first and only weakness. Because he'd held tight to the thread of hope that Moran could be saved, he hadn't killed him. He didn't mind offering up his shattered souls, whether or not it would be of any use. He just wanted to bring the old Moran back to the world of the living. That hurts. Hi! Shmei laughed, as if he understood everything Chuaning hadn't said. Your last-ditch effort couldn't pull the blue flower out of Moran's chest, but you did succeed in influencing his emotions. He found himself caught between good and evil, ultimately succumbing to madness and dying by his own hand. Chuaning's expression flickered, and he looked up in silence. After crossing paths on Mount Zhao with that Taxian Jin without a heartbeat, he had guessed Moran had met such an end, but he'd still felt a dull ache in his heart upon hearing Shimei say so bluntly that he'd taken his own life. So, I am slow, because I think this just confirmed that the Taxian Jin that we've been seeing torment Moran, so is a chess piece. And I don't know if I'm slow or if this is a reveal now. Um, Watching him closely, Shmei continued, Shizun, you did it. You protected him. I don't know how, but his soul's transmigrated to the past. He sighed. I still don't understand even now. You were an invalid then. How did you manage to dash my plans? Ah, you always manage to surprise me. He lowered his dark lashes, downy as a cattail fluff, and drew closer, as if to kiss Chuaning's lips. Chuaning jerked back to reality. Lightning fast, he grabbed Shimei by the throat, veins bulging on the back of his hands. Shimei's expression didn't waver. He calmly reached up to grip Chuaning's wrist, as though he'd anticipated such a reaction. Really, Shizun? He chuckled. Ruining me once isn't good enough for you? Unfortunately, you're too late. With a soft hiss, a gold and black banded crate slithered out of Shimei's wide sleeve and clamped its jaw around Chuaning's arm. I'm assuming it's a type of snake? But this is not good. Oh, maybe it's one of the snakes that was mentioned on Mount Zhao. Who knew what kind of magical tempering the snake had undergone, but the single bite was unbelievably agonizing. Chuaning's hands immediately went limp. Maneuvering him easily by the wrists, Shimei bound him against the bedpost in an even more humiliating position than before. Don't worry, the snake isn't venomous. Shimei tied Chuaning's hands together, then sat up and stroked the banded snake with a snow-white fingertip. He narrowed his peach blossom eyes. I raised the snake just for you. Its bite will sap you of strength. Out of respect for Shizun, I'll leave it at this. I feel like I'm gonna have to take a lot of breathers through this chapter because Shimei is driving me up the walls right now. Like, oh, I respect my Shizun so much. Let me just injure him for my sake and totally justify it as me doing it for his sake. And then also break the promise that I made to him. But I'm not gonna view it as me breaking a promise because I did let him out of the binding ropes. I just tied him up again afterwards. Okay. Shimei raised his hand, and the snake slithered back into his sleeve. Speaking of the past life, in truth, I never wanted to leave you with Moeyu for so long. Shimei stood up with unhurried movements. He removed his cloak, then his outer robe, then all the color drained from Chuaning's face. Shiming-jing, he thundered, revolted. Shimei flashed an agreeable smile and paced closer. Shizun, I'll tell you a secret. When you two were married in the past life, I came to the wedding banquet as Wabinan. Oh my word. Well, I mean, that's the second time you've been to their wedding and still you're not getting the picture. Wow. Chuaning's eyes flew wide in shock. Emperor Taishinjin draped you in red silks, selfishly preventing the guests from seeing your face. They only knew he'd married a consort, true, but I knew it was you. When the banquet ended, I didn't leave. I slipped into Red Lotus Pavilion, and then he walked in. Oh, this is a horrible, I mean, it's beautiful, but it's horrible, illustration. Huh. Give me the creeps, why don't you? Look at it. I hope you guys can see that clearly, because it is weirdly horrifying. Shimei's eyes glittered. He was under the control of my flower, but his thoughts and emotions were still his own. I hid. I couldn't let him detect me, but I didn't leave. Is this man about to confess to being a voyeur and still somehow convinced he's better than Moran? Overwhelming fury and disgust sent tremors through Chuaning as he looked back at him. Shimei took a step. Sorry. Shimei took a seat on the bed, laying cool hands on Chuaning's chest. Did you know? Obviously he didn't, otherwise he would have murdered you long ago. But sorry. I'm getting heated. His voice had become slightly hoarse, his eyes glittering hungrily. His fingers trailed down and paused at Chuaning's waist. He began to untie Chuaning's sash. The sight of you that night, mad with lust from the aphrodisiac, as he slept with you and pushed into you till you screamed. The rims of Shimei's eyes were reddened with desire. It's fueled my fantasies for 2 lifetimes. This is gonna be a slow read, guys. I'm so sorry, but like I'm having to stop after every single sentence this man says because his audacity is out of this world. Thank you, by the way, I appreciate that. This humiliation was almost too much to bear, but Chuaning was exhausted from receiving the memories from his other lifetime, and the snake bite had left him without any strength in his limbs. Shiming-jing, he gritted out, "Get out of here." Shimei let out a tinkling laugh. "It's just sex. No need to be touchy. Besides, haven't you already let one of your disciples sleep with you? Enough with the sanctimonious act." The cognitive dissonance is strong in this one. Like, I'm torn because on the one hand I kind of want to discuss it. On the other hand, if I discuss every single time Shimei says that he's better than Moran and then proves the exact opposite, I think we're gonna be here in eternity. So I'm gonna give you a look and we're silently gonna agree that Shimei is insane and then we're gonna keep going. Okay. Get out. What's the difference between getting on your knees to satisfy one disciple versus 2? Shmei asked blithely. I don't mind. So why don't you just lie back and enjoy it? You never know, my skills might be better than his. Get out. Before Chuaning could finish, he heard a frigid voice from the door. Get out. Chuaning jolted as if struck by lightning, whipping his head. Please tell me it's not Tashinjin. Whipping his head around. Without his notice, someone had opened the stone door. From outside, at its threshold, stood a man with his face in shadow, holding a long black and gold blade to his chest. He loomed imposingly with the door ajar behind him, a stern and upright silhouette lit from behind. Shimei's brows knit together. It's you? Back already? The man strode into the room, frigid air gusting in his wake. The candles swayed and flickered. Their light seemed somehow cold as it landed on his slim-fitting combat robes and leather armor, illuminating fully at last. His long legs were wrapped tightly in a pair of black military boots, and he wore about with a silver dragon's head buckle around his slender waist, with a weapon compartment of pure silver hanging from it. His thrown vembrands flashed above a pair of black dragon-skin gloves. Above it all was a handsome, chiseled face, his features impossibly gallant. Emperor Tashinjun. Great! We love that for us. Let's not take a shot every single time Shimei is a horrible human being because you might die. Although I feel bad for you every time you pause, I can't help but laugh. I'm glad someone is taking joy from my misery because I certainly am not. Okay. Why is Chuaning stuck between a rock and a hard husky? I don't know. It just He emanated a terrifying cold, and the coppery scent of blood lingered on him, as if he'd just come from a battlefield. When he looked up, his pale cheeks were still marred with a few flecks of blood. His dagger-like gaze honed in on the two men upon the bed, his eyes skimming over Chuaning, then bored into Shiming-Jing, glinting like a shard of ice. Go away. A chill settled over Shimei's features at the sight of him. He slowly sat upright. Did you kill all those people at Guiye like I asked you to? This is gonna be interesting because it seems like Ta Xinjun is no longer enamored with Shimei because surely he would recognize Shimei. And yet he seems unaffected by his presence. Let's see. It wasn't enough to satisfy this venerable one's appetite. As he crossed the room, he tore off his gloves with flashing white teeth, revealing fine-boned hands beneath. He tossed the bloody dragon skin onto the table, then fixed Shimei with a glare. Watch yourself. This venerable one won't hesitate to make you another vengeful ghost who's died by my hand. Shimei's expression was unsightly. Don't forget to whom you're speaking. This venerable one only cares whether or not I'm having a good time. Tai Xinjun shot back coldly. You're in the wrong bed. Get out. Since when do you have the right to use that tone with me? This venerable one has always had it, Tai Xinjun said, voice laced with a threat. Shimei seemed on the verge of losing his temper. I am your master, he cried, eyes flashing. So what? Mount Zhao is this venerable one's territory, and on that bed is this venerable one's property. You know, as much as I hate this for Chuaning, I love this for Shimei. I love this for Shimei. Yes, Shimei, suffer under your own arrogance, please. Oh, I hate that comparison, my goodness. I mean, unfortunately not wrong, but ugh. Ta Xinjun loomed over Shiming-Jing, the corner of his mouth quirking with mockery. Master, kindly get the hell out. Ta Xinjun, the way I'm gonna have to censor all of this, I'm sorry for however this turns out. Ta Xinjun and Shiming-Jing continued to fling insults back and forth, neither giving an inch. Chuaning watched from the sidelines in silence, rather lost. Shiming-Jing had said Ta Xinjun was dead, so what was this man before him? A pawn? A puppet? Plus, the good flower he'd neutralized had resided in the body of the present timeline Moran. Emperor Ta Xinjun's flower had been rooted too deeply. His heart could never recover. As such, he should have been helplessly in love with Shimei. But judging from his tone, he didn't give a rat's ass about him. And why did he call him his master? Shimei glared at Ta Xinjun, then scoffed and rose to his feet, draping a robe over his shoulders. Naturally, he was well acquainted with the answers to these questions that stumped Chuaning. Moran's suicide in the past lifetime had cost Shimei his most formidable weapon. He'd used medicine to revive Moran's physical body and rouse the cognizant soul that remained within it, turning the dead man into a revenant. Okay, I accidentally read ahead and it says it's similar to the Zhenlong chest formation, but it's not that. But it does mean if it's similar to the remainder of the soul that we saw being left over from the first what do you call it? Oh, now my brain has just completely gone offline. Who's the guy who we loved who died on the mountain, sacrificing himself for everyone? That guy, whose name now escapes me at the moment, I feel really bad about it. His ancestor, who they initially got to like rouse to consciousness despite being under control, and then he kind of like bought them more time. That dude, I'm wondering if it's going to be similar to that, where if the right buttons are pushed, the Ta Jin of the past could not only like be conscious in the way that he is now, but could turn against Shimei in a similar way that the old ancestor turned against Shishuanglin. Nangongse, thank you. I feel so bad for completely forgetting his name. I'm on Ta Xinjun's side is when he's against Shimei. I think that's all of us right now. Um, okay, the result was similar to a Zhenlong chess pawn. Ta Xinjun would obey Shimei's orders while retaining his original consciousness. There were, however, several outcomes that Shimei had not foreseen. Perhaps he had made a mistake somewhere, or perhaps Moran had suffered too much trauma while alive. I wonder why. Or perhaps the unnatural modification to Moran's body, first in life then death, had caused some irreversible damage. At any rate, the Revenant Ta Xinjun's memories of Shimei were hopelessly confused. He'd think Shimei was alive in one moment and dead in the next. Sometimes he'd forget who Shimei was entirely. Even though Ta Xinjun was presently staring Hua Binan in the face, he didn't recognize this person before him as the man whose memories he'd long cherished. Ah, okay, that explains a little bit. He only saw him as his master, whose orders he often ignored. That is the most Moran thing I've ever heard, oh my goodness. You're impossible to deal with. Shimei walked up to Ta Xinjun, prodded him in the forehead. Scatter soul, he commanded. Ta Xinjun stiffened. His sharp gaze went slack, his pupils losing focus. You're a puppet, I made, but you're getting more and more defiant. Always talking back to me and trying to undermine me. Shimei patted Ta Xinjun's ice-cold cheek. It's fine. I don't blame you. You're a mere scrap of a person, after all. Ta Xinjun stared straight ahead in uncomprehending silence. Try to bear with it a little longer, Shimei advised. Once I get my hands on the item we talked about, I'll refine it for you. Then you'll behave. It doesn't sound like Ta Xinjun wins in any of this, if I'm being honest, but then again, we don't necessarily want him to win. We just don't want Shimei to win either. Yet just as he said this, his control over Ta Xinjun again began to fray. Shimei's face turned somber as he saw how quickly Ta Xinjun was recovering. In no time at all, Ta Xinjun's eyes were once more bright and focused. If anything, they were even colder and more determined than before. This is a very interesting complication that I love Shimei has created for himself. Like, that is, the irony is great. It does mean that Chuaning and our Moran is gonna have even more trouble, but I appreciate that they're not the only ones having trouble because of Ta Xinjun. At least Shimei is also having it. Ta Xinjun turned that oppressive cold gaze on Shimei. He squinted slightly and wrinkled his nose, like a panther peering at its meal. Why haven't you gone away yet? His slender fingers closed around Bugwei's hilt. Do you want to become one of the Venerable One's sword practice dummies? Shimei didn't bother answering. Ta Xinjun was too pig-headed. Even as his so-called master, Shimei Jing knew the rope around his neck would have no effect no matter how hard he yanked it. If this Lord of Darkness truly gave his wildest impulses their heads, the outcome would be frightful. In the end, Shimei had little choice but to leave. I should not be feeling this happy because it means that now Chuaning is going to be left alone with Ta Xinjun, but just give me this moment of happiness before the apparent tragedy. As the door closed behind him, Ta Xinjun stared at Chuaning on the bed. His expression was subtly strange, as though he was trying with all his might to hold back, yet was overcome by a longing he couldn't suppress. He sat down and reached for Chuaning, grabbing him by the waist. His voice faltered. Didn't know how to continue, so he pressed his lips together and changed tack. You. Chuaning looked back at him steadily, but even after more than a moment, Ta Xinjun didn't finish that thought. He blinked several times, his eyes swimming with undistinguished bitterness. This Venerable One has something important to tell you. Go on. Ta Xinjun hesitated again, then backpedaled. Actually, it's not that important. No need to say it. This is new. I don't want to get hopeful yet, but this is new. Met with silence, Ta Xinjun spoke up again in an even more decisive manner. It doesn't matter whether or not it's important. If you want to hear it so badly, this Venerable One will tell you. Please do. This left Chuaning at a loss for words. The emotional whiplash this man is probably receiving right now. This Venerable One wants to say, Ta Xinjun took a deep breath and closed his eyes. This Venerable One wants to say, he repeated stiffly, that after all these years, it's almost like this Venerable One might have missed you somewhat. He added hastily, not very much though, just a little bit. I'm sorry, I think I've been so stressed that even like the smallest hint of humor is such a relief to me. Face instantly clouded over with regret at having voiced such a sentiment. Chuaning stared at him blankly, the souls and memories from 2 lifetimes bleeding together in his mind. He wasn't sure how he ought to feel about this man. But Ta Xinjun didn't leave him time to ponder. Almost distraught with impatience, he unknotted the rope from around Chuaning's wrists and tugged Chuaning towards him, bringing a broad palm to the back of Chuaning's head. Agitated and infuriated, he pressed a fervent kiss to his lips. Of course, we can't just stick to, like, awkward confessions of love. No. We have to go to violating Chuaning. Ta Xinjun's lips were cold as ice, but the flames of his passion were red hot. In the space of this impetuous, frantic kiss, a flood of memories from bygone life seemed to merge and overlap. Their lips once again met across 2 lifetimes of fickle fate. These 2 people, 2 sets of fragmented, imperfect souls, kissed and intertwined their limbs once more. When Ta Xinjun clutched him to his chest and kissed him, Chuaning's mind seemed to be simultaneously inundated and yet utterly empty, thoughts slipping through his fingers like water. But in the end, he could tell his eyes were wet. Right and wrong, good and evil, none of it was clearly divided, none so easy to discern. But as he kissed the man whose body would never again be warm, Chuaning knew one thing. Ta Jin wasn't lying. Moran wasn't lying. He really had missed him. Well, that's conflicting. Okay, let me just take 2 seconds to breathe before we go on to the next chapter. You know what? I will take. This feels like the bar is so low. It's basically in the underworld at the moment. But I will take the W's consent of Chuaning and Ta Jin right now, because that's what it very much felt like to me. Where, like, on the one hand, Chuaning was okay with it and not okay with it, and kind of hating himself for it and kind of wanting to give himself grace, that kind of thing. I will take that over the outright rape that Shimei would have forced upon Chuaning had Ta Jin not entered. Okay. Page 133, chapter 255. Confession. This could be great, this could be horrible. Considering where Chuaning is, this might be horrible. Chuaning didn't know how long the kiss lasted before Ta Jin released him. He thought Ta Jin had had enough, only to feel their lips come together once more. It took several more aborted attempts at stopping before Ta Jin was finally sated. He licked his lips, black pupils fixed on Chuaning's face. It's you. You haven't changed. After all that had happened, there were too many questions to ask. Chuaning was still for a moment, then spoke up in a hoarse voice. Do you still remember the past? Of course. Do you remember how you died? Ta Jin's face darkened. The 10 great sects joined forces and surrounded me. This venerable one was sick of it. Do you remember how I died? The storm clouds slowly cleared from Ta Jin's brow, only to be replaced by a different kind of shadow. You stood in my way at Tashia Palace. This venerable one wouldn't allow it. Then do you remember how you came back to life after you died? Hobinan revived me. How did he do it? Naturally, before he could explain, a strange blankness came over Ta Jin's face. He closed his eyes, but only for a moment. When he opened them again, they were clear and bright once more. Ta Jin knitted his brows. What were you saying just now? Chuaning didn't reply. He had more or less guessed what Shimei had done to Ta Jin's body. A person's heart was the most difficult thing to control. After Moran had died, Shimei wasn't powerful enough to rule this revenant's turbulent emotions, and he didn't dare touch Moran's already fractured memories. He had thus opted to prevent Moran from defying certain orders by erasing the relevant memories. This Emperor Ta Jin really was no more than a walking corpse. Chuaning closed his eyes. Eventually his lips parted again, as though to speak. But before he could get the words out, he tasted iron at the back of his throat and began to cough violently. I have a thought, but I almost feel like if I say it, then it's more likely to happen, and I don't want it to happen. It's like the most irrational thing ever, but I'm scared that somehow our much hated Shimei has put something into Moran's body to poison Chuaning as punishment for every time that he sleeps with Ta Xinjun. Because then he can like justify to himself that like, I only did it to punish you because you dared to sleep with this guy who you didn't have a choice in sleeping with, but I'm totally gonna blame you for it. If you hadn't slept with him, then you wouldn't have been poisoned, hence why the punishment was needed. I hope that's not the case. It just feels oddly timed, I guess. Chuaning closed his eyes. Eventually, his lips parted again, as though to speak. But before he could get the words out, he tasted iron at the back of his throat and began to cough violently. Moran, he choked out between blood-stained lips. He raised his watering eyes. Stop working for him. You're just an empty shell. You should have been laid to rest long ago. He was cut off by another spat of coughs. His vision flashed dark, shattered memories threatening to engulf him once more. You should go back to the past. You've already entered your eternal rest. You don't belong here. But Chuaning didn't have the strength to say this. His lips twitched one last time as his awareness began to fade. The last thing he saw was Ta Xinjun's frowning face, his pallid, handsome features tense with worry as his lips formed a name, Chuaning. He hazily heard Ta Xinjun calling to him, just like in the past life. Huaning. He closed his eyes. The agony of his soul's knitting back together rushed up. Oh, it's because, okay. Rushed up again, and he knew no more. Many mountains away, the leaves rustled in a forest in Sichuan. In recent days, misty rain had fallen continuously over the region. Even the wooden window lattices of the delivery outpost was beginning to darken with a faint layer of mildew. From its little window, one could watch drops of water falling one by one from bamboo leaves outside, like beads rolling off a string. As they dripped into the puddle below, gentle ripples rose in their wake. Without warning, a pair of shoes splashed through the water, scattering the peaceful reflections of the clouds. Mozongshe had arrived before the winding path leading up to Sishan Peak. Okay. Hold on. So I had stupidly deluded myself into believing, hoping that maybe this entire book would be from Chuaning's perspective, and though that would be painful, you know, considering what we've seen so far, I'm kind of being lulled into a false sense of security a little bit. But I had hoped that if that was the case, then Volume 9 would be basically everything from Moran's point of view, dealing with what was hinted at early on, and kind of running concurrently with the events of Chuaning's kidnapping, so that technically not that much time would have passed, which would mean that not that much damage would be done before they are reunited, and that hope was just dashed. So that's great. We love that for us. Okay. I am very nervous. Ascending Dragonblood Mountain, his spiritual energy had yet to recover. He couldn't travel by sword, yet so anxious was he about Shizun Peak's safety that he'd rushed from Dragonblood Mountain entirely on foot, making the journey in a scant 4 days. Along the way, he'd had time to think about many things. He thought about why he'd been reborn, and why the past lives Chuaning had left that spell in the cave on Dragonblood Mountain. He thought about Shimei. He pondered it all over the 4 days of his journey, but arrived at no satisfactory answer to any of his questions. He'd never been a clever person. In his current state, beset by torment and worry, he found himself unable to see anything clearly. Shimei knew him too well. Chuaning was his weakness. If Chuaning remembered his past life, it was tantamount to a death sentence for Moran. His heart twisted in knots. The rain fell faster. Moran stood in the wind at the bottom of the steps leading up to Shizun Peak. He lifted his chin. Rain-silvered locks framing his face. The stone stairway unfurled before him, winding its way up to the summit, wreathed in mist. I just stupidly realized that Moran is still completely unaware of the goof flower that dictated all his past actions. Now, again, not trying to shift all of the responsibility away from Moran, but I wonder how he will deal with that reveal once it happens. Can you tell I'm just trying to put off whatever he's about to find on Shizun Peak? He'd walked this mountain path through all the joys and sorrows of life and death. Across 2 lifetimes, he'd ascended these stairs countless times, from his naive teen years to this final reckoning today, as he returned to answer for his crimes. The day was cold, with bits of sleet mixed in with the rain. His black robes were slowly soaking through, his temples sodden and icy. These days of his youth should have been carefree, but the chill north wind turned his hair white with snow. Moran closed his eyes. He stepped onto the long staircase, climbing towards the top of the mountain. At last, he pushed open the red lacquered doors of Shizun Peak's loyalty hall, a fugitive walking straight into a well-laid trap. I had a thought. That thought has now left. Nope, cannot think it. The door creaked as it swung. The door creaked as it swung ponderously open. For 2 lifetimes, all of his madness and glory, his nightmares and sins, had been tied to this place. In his past life, at the age of 22, he changed Loyalty Hall's name to Wushan Palace. He'd smashed the sign hanging above the door, reducing it to billowing dust. Standing before those ruined words, he vowed to trample the world's cultivators underfoot, to rule over all under heaven. In that lifetime, he tumbled into the abyss here. In this lifetime, he would likewise meet his end beneath this roof. I remember what I wanted to say now. And now it's left again. This can't keep going. Damn! It was something about Jin. This is gonna bother me. Oh, okay, yes, this was it. So, I'm happy, considering we've now learned that Jin did die and was revived as a walking corpse. I can't help but feel a little bit relieved, because for a moment there I was scared that there was a third world where he hadn't died and he was being brought from that third world. So knowing that this still is just 2 timelines' work is weirdly relieving. Royalty Hall was packed with people. The crowd contained even more notable figures than the group that had trekked up Mount Zhao to apprehend Shu Shuanglin. All of them turned at the creak of the door. They saw a tall man standing before the threshold. His complexion was wan, his bedraggled hair plastered limply to his forehead. Behind him, icy rain swirled down from the leaden sky. Nobody had expected Moran would appear so suddenly. Was this the hero who'd led everyone to safety on Mount Zhao, or the monster who'd slaughtered so many at Guiye? Who was he, really? For a moment no one spoke. Every pair of eyes was fixed on the travel-worn man who'd reappeared in their midst. Those who trusted him found him pitiable. He was wet and cold, like a dog who trudged home through the rain. Those who distrusted him found him terrifying. He was forebodingly wretched, like a ghost who'd crawled out from hell. Interesting how one's thoughts can color your perception. The rain pummeled the roof and its dark eaves, seeping into the cracks in the stone walkway and running over the moss growing in the shingles. Moran looked up, his night-dark eyes wet beneath dense lashes like two black fans. "Uncle, I'm back," he said softly. "Renard, why are you by yourself?" Zhu Zhengyong was sitting in the sect leader's seat. His face was lined with anxiety, and he wasn't dressed as neatly as usual. His iron fan had haphazardly tossed onto the table the words, "Others are ugly." I forgot about that. Shimmering faintly as if offering commentary on the on the farcical scene. "Where's you home?" Moran took a step into the hall. He was like a drop of water landing in a pot of boiling oil, sending up a raucous splatter. Almost everyone simultaneously drew back from the doors. "Moran, you monster! The nerve of you to show your face now! You killed so many at Guiye, yet you dare return here?" Moran ignored these shouts. He'd heard news of the bloody massacre at Guiye on his way to Shizun Peak. He knew better than anyone that Ta Jin was deranged. That what were a few dozen lives to him? Even the deaths of 100 or 1,000 hardly tipped the scale. To his mind, all the world's inhabitants amounted to no more than a swarm of walking corpses. Ta Jin would think nothing of slaughtering all of Guiye. "Lunatic, you and Huabinan are working together. What are you trying to pull? The best fighters from every sector are here right now, and the master of Tianyin Pavilion is on his way here. Is on her way. No matter how slippery you are, you won't be able to worm your way out of this one." You really had us, Moran, playing the hero one moment and then the villain the next. Do you think your schemes will succeed if you confuse the hell out of everyone? You're despicable. Fair. Accusations and taunts rushed towards him like a tide, faces etched with fury pressed in. But Moran ignored them all as he continued forward. By now, he'd understood what Huabinan intended for him. Huabinan, for Moran didn't wish to call him Shimei, had dug a grave for Moran. He'd already inscribed his name on the tombstone. Huabinan was certain Moran would jump into the grave of his own accord. The instant Chuaning remembered the events of the past life, Mo Ye had sentenced himself to death. He was beyond saving. Everything was over. Okay, as much as this sucks, I can sympathize with where Moran's head is at, but just take Shimei with you when you go. Obviously I don't want him to die, but what I'm hoping for is that he tries to take Shimei with him as he goes, and then inadvertently shoves Shimei into the grave and climbs out himself. That's what the ideal is, okay? I mean, listen, when you're out of your mind with fear, I don't expect you to be logical as much as at the same time you would expect people to be logical. It just like it's one of those things of I hate that you're being so stupid about this, but I also can't blame you. Mm. No matter how many masks you wear, the heroes assembled here today will expose your true face. We'll send you to Tianyan Pavilion for sentencing. The crowd shouted and jeered. Over and over, their most frequently repeated refrain was Tianyan Pavilion. Moran hadn't expected Wabinan to involve Tianyan Pavilion. Was it coincidence? Or part of a larger plot? The lofty Tianyan Pavilion was an ancient sect established in the cultivation realm thousands of years ago. Their first leader had been the son of a god and a mortal, and the mantle of the pavilion master was thereafter passed down through his bloodline. Although the divine blood flowing through each new master's veins grew thinner with the generations, their spiritual energy remained bountiful. I wonder if maybe the thing that Shimei is trying to refine is attached to Tianyan Pavilion, whatever that may be. Tianyan Pavilion did not often meddle in mortal affairs, but just as commoners believed in the power of cultivators, so too did cultivators believe in the righteousness of Tianyan Pavilion. The longer any authority was enshrined, the harder it became to overthrow. Ooh, what a line. In the past life, Taishin Jin had aspired to rule over the vast lands of the realm, but he left Tianyan Pavilion untouched. This maneuver of placing Moran's sentencing in the hands of Tianyan Pavilion was an astute one. No one would, or could, challenge the verdict. I hate that. The noisy crowd parted before Moran as he walked down the um, Polia embroidered carpet. When he reached the front of the hall, he came to a stop. With this single word, the hubbub died down. Everyone trained their eyes on him, many of their stares hateful and weary. They were waiting for him to talk back, to panic, to misstep. They were craning their necks in anticipation, ready to throw themselves at this evil monster and tear him to shreds. They didn't know if this man was good or evil, or what precisely he had done, but they would rather kill the wrong man than let him go. They would stop at nothing to I've come to confess my crimes. So I had planned to read until the bottom of the page before taking the 10-minute break, but considering that all hell is probably about to break loose, I think maybe it's better to break here instead of in the middle of all the hell breaking loose. Um, so we're gonna stop here for 10 minutes and then we'll be back at like 11-ish past to finish up the rest of the hour. Okay, we are back. I don't know why, but my throat is suddenly very scratchy, so we'll see how this goes. I do have water here with me. It is technically, what do you call it in English? The kind where you like have a very sweet substance you mix into it. That sounds dubious. But it's unmokkeldank in Afrikaans. I cannot remember the English word for it. So if you wonder why the water is colored that way, it's because it's not just water. Um, anyway, we're back. I brought tissues just in case. Um, so where were we? Okay, we were at Moran confessing his crimes. Great. Squash? Okay. Yeah. I think it's not technically a cordial, because it's more like generally, I don't want to say for children, but it's usually um, used by like bought for children, whereas it's not like colotonic or things like that, you know. Uh, but anyway, hush fell over the crowd, a fuller silence than before. The assembled cultivators were like soldiers sharpening their sabers amidst the thunder of war drums and savage cries of battle, only to receive the sudden news that the enemy general had killed himself in his tent rather than fight. How utterly absurd. Okay, there we go. What did he say? It was a moment before someone finally reacted, unable to believe this villain would admit his guilt so easily. One woman quietly asked her neighbor, "Did he say he's here to confess his crimes?" Lashes lowered, Moran knelt before his aunt and uncle and a deathly pale Shimon. The hazy lamplight fell upon his handsome, gaunt face. He intended to bare his neck for the executioner's blade, yet he was also unwilling to comply so readily with Wabinan's schemes. Before his own reckoning came, there was one more thing he needed to do. He hadn't much strength remaining, but he would exhaust it all to protect the man he'd never be able to protect again. Moran began to speak, slow and sombre. "My hands are indeed covered in blood. Because of a personal grievance, I killed many people. For years, I've wanted to repent, but my crimes are unpardonable. Chuaning has already learned of this matter. I wish to lay bare my wrongdoings before you all today, and also to make another declaration." Here he paused before letting the next words fall like a knife carving out his heart. "Chuaning and I are no longer master and disciple." Most of the crowd gaped in astonishment. What's going on? In the cultivation realm, it was considered a major scandal for a teacher and student to publicly part ways. Such a falling out damaged the reputation of both parties. As such, a master and disciple would strive to maintain the outward appearance of harmony even if their relationship was uncomfortably strained, so long as the grudges between them weren't impossibly bloody or deep. Once the initial shock passed, many began to mutter among themselves. Weren't they getting along just fine before? What changed so suddenly? He'd better not be trying to trick us. Look at him. It doesn't seem like he's faking. Did something happen on Mount Zhao? It's possible. Chuaning doesn't seem to place much value in his disciples. When Huabinan captured Shimingjing, didn't he dawdle instead of rushing over to save him? Shimingjing was blinded. If I were his disciple, I'd be disillusioned too. The murmurs ebbed and flowed like a tide. How is Moran gonna be throwing himself on the proverbial sword and yet not mentioning to anyone that they should maybe be weary of Shimei? Like, that feels like a pretty obvious thing that needs to be cleared up. The murmurs ebbed and flowed like a tide, voices rising over the chatter. Moran continued. He didn't tolerate my crimes, but that's not the main reason I wish to sever our ties. He has always treated me coldly and insulted my dignity. He speaks constantly of his compassion for the common people, yet he's so cruel to his disciples, a hypocrite. If it weren't for him, I would have never walked down this path. It hurt too much. Moran paused, his teeth chattering, but he had to press on. He had to keep dragging the blade across his skin. He mistreated me and misunderstood me. He and I don't share the same goals, and I'm ashamed to have chosen him as my teacher. From now on, Chuaning and I have nothing to do with one another. If anyone refers to me as his disciple after today, he raised his eyes, Ta Xinjin's eyes. The very thought makes me sick. I beg you all to never speak of it again. Renard! Zhi Zhengyong gasped in horror. Ge, are you crazy? Shimeng cried, his face ashen. Do you know what you're saying? Moran closed his eyes. He couldn't bear to look at anyone in Shimeng's family. Even that single cry of Ge was like a talon piercing his chest. This is so funny because all I can think is like, once this is done, not this volume, the novel as a whole, I need a fix-it fic where the time travel back is not as traumatic as this one. Because I keep thinking, like, why are we even back here? It feels like we're just repeating all the pain of the past. Oh no, okay. There's one more thing I want to announce, Moran said. A confession is a confession. What's with all these announcements and declarations? Before the protesters could finish, Jiang Shi, the cultivation world's current leader, raised a hand for silence. Eyes on Moran, he commanded, "Please continue. I have indeed committed terrible crimes and deserve to be punished in accordance with our laws," Moran said. "However, what happened at Guiyu has nothing to do with me." Many of the cultivators present had come to avenge deaths of blood. Their emotions had been running high since they arrived. Hearing Moran deny his involvement in Guiyu's murders, they could no longer restrain themselves. "Nonsense!" someone shouted. "How do you think you can argue against eyewitness testimony?" "That's right. Who else could it have been?" "I was never at Guiyu," answered Moran. "During the time Chuaning and I were both on Dragonblood Mountain, someone else is the culprit. If I'm not mistaken, it's—" He hesitated to name Ta Xinjin. It wasn't that he feared the crowd's fury, rather he was certain no one would believe anything so absurd as a second Moran coming into the world through a space-time gate. "Who?" someone piped up. Moran pressed lips together, resolved to wait a little before mentioning Ta Xinjin. "I'll get to that later," he said instead. "At any rate, he's working with Hua Binan. One of them appeared at Guiyu to frame me, while the other abducted Chuaning." Two types of cries rose up from the crowd. The first was weaker, yet still possible to make out, and came mostly from Sishan Peak's disciples. "What happened to Yuheng Elder? Where did they take the Elder?" The second was voiced by those who'd come to condemn and criticize Moran. "Did you think we'd believe such a ridiculous story? What the hell are you smoking? How could someone else be responsible? You're the one who's on the same side as Hua Binan. You two put on quite the performance on Mount Zhao. Killing so many people didn't faze you at all. Shiming Jing is your own Shishong, yet you didn't hesitate to maim him. You heartless liar. At Shimei's name, Moran slowly raised his head. He looked up at Xu Zhengyong, then glanced at Shumeng. About Shimei, sick with worry, Shumeng staggered forward a step. What happened to Shimei? Is he okay? Moran found himself unable to meet Shumeng's eyes. He had seen that kind of shattered expression on his face once before. Once was more than enough. Shimei is Hua Binan, Moran said, eyes still closed. The entire hall fell silent. A moment later, Shumeng dropped back into his seat. Stop joking. How's that even possible? If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes and heard it with his own ears, Moran would have thought the same. Shimei was gentle and good. The three of them had been through so much together. Shimei was the first real friend his own age he'd ever made. But this friendship turned out to be a sham, like the lovely reflection of the moon on water. It was a travesty from beginning to end. The onlookers began to murmur among themselves. What kind of nonsense is this? He's lost his mind. How could that little cultivator be the world's foremost medicinal sage? If Shimei was Hua Binan, why would he help us with the heart tunnelers on Mount Zhao? One of the people Shimei had rescued was deeply grateful towards their savior. Heedless of any consequence, he pointed a shaking finger and cried, Moran, the gall you have to tell these brazen lies to clear your name. This is slander. Jiang Shi, who'd been listening with his brow furrowed in silence, now spoke up as well. What evidence do you have that Hua Binan is Shiming Jing? Hua Binan has worked in my sect for many years. During that time, he'd hardly ever left Guyu. If he, like you say, is actually Shiming Jing, how do you explain how he can appear in two places at the same time? I wonder, much the same way that Moran can, maybe. I know that's probably not the answer, but this is so complicated. I'm glad he said it, because at least now it's kind of like on the people to believe him and not on Moran just deciding not to divulge that information. But it still sucks. That's interesting. Give me a second. Okay. So, we have page 145, chapter 256, Trials and Tribulations. But interestingly enough, right at the top of it, it says Tianyan Pavilion. So I wonder why they decided to name the location here. Hanlin the sage spends most of his time in his pulver-refining workroom and rarely makes public appearances. When he does, it's with a veil, said Moran. All he'd need to do is control someone who could pass as a body double, and we'd be none the wiser. So what you're saying, Jiang Shi said, brows furrowed, is that the Hua Binan at Guiyu is a fake? Not always. The real one and the fake one might have switched places as needed. To do that, Shiming Jing would need to be able to wield the Zhenlong chest formation, Jiang Shi said, following his line of logic. Our medicine master lacks the spiritual strength necessary for such a technique. Zhang Zhengmen is not wrong. The Zhenlong chest formation does require a prodigious, amount of spiritual energy from its wielder. Hua Binan might know it in theory, but he is unable to use it himself with his weak spiritual energy. That's why he needed Shuanglin. That makes no sense, Jiang Shi said with a shake of his head. Shuanglin called the person behind the scenes an ally. He was unwilling to betray them. All the way until his death, he refused to reveal his co-conspirator's identity. If, as you say, Shimei is Hua Binan, then Shuanglin would have recognized him. But if that's so, then when Hua Binan destroyed his rebirth array, why didn't Shi Shuanglin turn on him? Because Shi Shuanglin had no idea that Shimei and Hua Binan were one and the same. Moran answered, Master Xuanjing, the abbot of Wubei Temple, stroked his beard. They must have been working closely together. How could Shi Shuanglin not have known something so important? Shi Shuanglin considered Shimei a friend, but there's no way Shimei held him in the same regard. To him, Shi Shuanglin would have been nothing more than a piece on a chessboard. Moran thought it over. Back when Hua Binan was injured on Mount Zhao, he removed his veil to reveal a disfigured face with a raised, spiny texture to the skin. In retrospect, that was likely some kind of sophisticated skin mask. Perhaps Shi Shuanglin only ever saw the original face of this friend of his, that is, Shimei's face. He wouldn't have made the connection between Hua Binan and Shimei on sight alone. He died never realizing he'd been set up, used by someone he considered a friend. He never knew the truth. So according to this theory, Jiang Shi said, when Shimingjing and Hua Binan were both on Mount Zhao at the same time, one of the two was actually a Zhenlong pawn. That's my guess, but there's another possibility. What? Moran shook his head. I'll come back to it in just a moment. Let's say Mo Shiju's first explanation is correct, Master Shenjing said. This humble monk still feels there's something we're missing. Why did Hua Binan disrupt Shi Shuanglin's rebirth array? Does he have some grudge against Shi Shuanglin? Some reason to deprive Shi Shuanglin of his wish to see Luo Fenghua reborn? Moran sighed. Does the great master recall what Shi Shuanglin's array turned out to be? The old bull donkey shook his head, taken aback. The rift that appeared wasn't rebirth, Moran explained. In fact, Shimei didn't actually teach the rebirth technique to Shi Shuanglin at all. Huh? He was lying to Shi Shuanglin the entire time. Shi Shuanglin made all that effort, believing he was planting the seeds for his rebirth technique, but all he did was grow a garden for the use of Hua Binan and his weak spiritual power. Then which technique did Hua Binan teach him? The foremost of the forbidden techniques. The next word seemed to stick in Moran's throat as he spoke them. What Shi Shuanglin learned was the technique for the space-time gates of life and death. Murmurs ran through the crowd. Those who'd been on Mount Zhao couldn't help but recall the black rift torn in the sky and the thousands of mysterious cultivators who'd poured out of it. That had been the space-time gate? This would be the other possibility I raised earlier, Moran said. Using the space-time gate, it would indeed be possible for Shimei to be in the same place at the same time, one from this world and the other from an entirely different world from our own. I believe that's the arc name, the Tianyan Pavilion arc. Okay. Wait. I just hate the idea of two Shimeis. One is bad enough right now. The silence was broken by someone slapping their thigh and guffawing. Mo Zongshi, what kind of bedtime story is this? Legendary forbidden technique? Two Shimingjings? The man was gasping with laughter. You can't be serious. Right? How would that even be possible? We're talking about a forbidden technique that's been lost for thousands of years. How would anyone even learn it? According to legend, the most important scroll related to this space-time gate technique was sealed within the Flame Emperor's sacred tree long ago. Even if somebody wanted to learn it based on the surviving texts, they would be able to master the space aspect at best. There's no way they could tear a rift in time. If one world's timeline were to overlap with another's, both worlds would be thrown into chaos. Is that not what you would call what is currently happening, though? Moran didn't bother to refute their objections. This was likely the very last opportunity he, as Mo Zongshi, would have to reveal everything. After today, the odds that these people would listen to anything he said was slim to none. He would use the pretext of confessing his crimes to hold their attention, to make them think just long enough to share what he'd deduced. Whether they believed him or not, he would have said his piece. It was all the warning he could give them. If things got worse from here, perhaps some might recall what he said today, and it wouldn't be too late. That is fair and logical, but knowing Meatban, it's gonna be like the worst best case scenario you can think of. Or just the worst case scenario you can think of. Everyone, please just imagine it. Pretend I'm Huabinan and I've grasped the fundamentals of both the Zhenlong chess formation and the space-time gate, yet I have neither the spiritual strength to wield them, nor the status or authority to take reckless action. What would I do? Most of the crowd in the hall had already written Moran off and were unwilling to hear him out. Jiang Xu, however, held some measure of esteem towards him after their previous interactions. He also had his own suspicions about the slaughter at Guiye. He considered Moran's question and concluded you'd get someone to help you. Who would help you? Nobody. Right, Moran nodded. Truly, nobody would help. And so, as Huabinan, I'd have no option but to deceive someone into helping. Someone with a powerful ambition or goal. Someone like Shi Shuanglin. I'd befriend him, and I'd pretend to help him with his plans. Mo Shizhu is being absurd, Master Xuanjing scoffed. What makes you so sure the array was the space-time gate? The gate is not a feat achievable by just anyone. In thousands of years, nobody has managed it. The most important scroll for the technique is lost. Who would be able to accomplish this? Exactly, someone else piped up. This is pure fantasy. Why not say Fushi's descendant... Why not say Fushi's descended to walk this world again? It's about as likely as a space-time gate opening. A ludicrous idea. Even tavern stories would find this too much of a stench. Stench? Stretch. My bad. Oh my word, where did that come from? Oh no, okay. Concurring murmurs filled Loyalty Hall. Eventually, someone said scornfully, Mo Zongshi, you've laid it out so nicely. Surely you're not about to tell us that the one who killed those heroes at Guiye wasn't you, but another version of yourself who came through the space-time gate. When Moran made no response, the crowd burst into laughter. Incredible! Incredible. To think Mo Zongshi would go to such elaborate lengths to exonerate himself. All that imagine this and imagine that, and in the end he just wants to blame his crimes on a tall tale. Unable to bear the incessant chatter any longer, Jiang Shi shook out his sleeves and turned to glare at the hecklers. If you've something to say, then out with it. What are you insinuating? Gentlemen, it's not that these bystanders are insinuating anything untoward, but rather that Mo Zongshi's tale is far too fantastical. Master Xuanjing pressed his palms together piously. In this humble monk's opinion, it would be best to invite Tianyan Pavilion to do a thorough investigation before any decision is made. That's right, Tianyan Pavilion's master should be arriving any moment. Once she's here, let Mo Zongshi try and take her for a ride. Before Jiang Shi could reply, Zhu Zhengyong cut in. Renar's reasoning makes sense. Perhaps the space-time gate really did open. Tianyan Pavilion's investigations are reserved for only the most heinous crimes. Though his emotions were in disarray, his voice was firm. Until we've cleared things up, you're not taking him anywhere. We have not said how much we love Shizun Yong recently enough. So can I just reiterate that I love Shizun Yong so much? If he dies in this timeline, I am screaming. I will mute the mic and I will scream because you cannot give him to me and then take him away again. Where are we with time? What concerns me though, before we continue, is that the what were they called? The Feather Tribe? They were all killed and turned into chess pieces. So how can we be sure that Shimei hasn't messed with the Tianyan Pavilion in the same way? Because the Feather Tribe was also supposed to be all powerful and untouched by worldly affairs. That's right, a Session Peak disciple stepped forward. When things were at their worst on Mount Zhao, it was Mo Shishong who saved you. Would you be standing here today if not for him? If he really wanted to destroy the cultivation realm, he could have just left us trapped on Mount Zhao. Well, Master Shunjing sputtered. It's true, another person chimed in. Back then, it was Mo Zongshi who opened the way. If he wanted to kill us, he could have done it right there. The truth of this statement gave a few people pause. For a moment, the roiling crowd seemed to settle, but the matter was not so easily put aside. Many in the crowd had donned mourning clothes for the friends and family they'd so recently lost, and for whom they were still grieving. The survivors of the massacre in the Garden Pavilion had witnessed Moran's slaughter with their own eyes. Only Mei Hanshi had found something off about the situation. We have not had a lot of Mei Hanshi, but he is quickly becoming kinda iconic, I'm not gonna lie. I know he's a little bit shameless, but still. Every other survivor was fully convinced the killer had been the man standing before them now. For them to put aside their lust for vengeance would take much more than some fantastical tale of their space-time gate. It didn't take long before someone voiced a new disagreement. Something's still not right. All of you remember, don't you? On Mount Huang, Mo Zongshi displayed a profound understanding of the workings of the Zhenlong chess formation. He's saying Shi Mingjing knows the Zhenlong chess formation, but isn't he the one who knows too much about this forbidden technique? That's right. Another that's right. Another dissenter chimed in. You know what else is odd? How did Moran open the seal on Mount Zhao when he's not a Nangong descendant? Nothing odd about that, a clear female voice answered from the entrance of Loyalty Hall. After all, Nangong blood runs through Mo Zongshi's veins. The crowd turned as one, as a cadre? I don't know if that's correct. Of guards marched in array in silver green marched in arrayed in silver green armor, each with a tassel dangling from their waist bearing a silver token embossed with the word Tian. At their head was a beautiful young woman who looked to be in her late 20s. With her bright eyes, clear features, and thick, inky hair, she could have rivaled the cultivation world's #1 beauty, Song Chutong. That is oddly correct. It is definitely not a Danmei if we don't have mock mentality. If not for the iciness in her demeanor that underscored her striking looks. Her appearance sent ripples through the crowd, and a few sect leaders stood up a little straighter. Only Jiang Shi remained unmoved, nodding as she strode across the threshold. Pavilion Master, you finally arrived. This armored woman was none other than the reclusive master of Tianyan Pavilion, Mu Yan Li. Kinda low-key love the fact that she's called Yan Li. I don't know how much, like, how long I will love that fact if she will become despised real quickly, but for now, kind of love the fact that she shares Yan Li from Untained's name. As the leader of Tianyan Pavilion, investigations into the most monstrous crimes committed in the cultivation realm all fell under her purview. Still, cases that required Tianyan Pavilion's intervention were few and far between, and thus Tianyan Pavilion's leader had rarely made any public appearances, or indeed stepped outside Tianyan Pavilion at all in the past several decades. Her reclusiveness was evident in the fairness of her skin, so exceedingly pale one could see the faint traceries of veins beneath it. I mean, it could also be because she's dead and being controlled by Shimei, but maybe that's just my paranoia speaking at this point. She took a few deliberate steps into the hall, then stopped and said evenly, "Apologies for my tardiness. Did something delay the pavilion, Master?" Master Shenjing asked. "Not quite," Wu Yanli answered with a shake of her head. Tianyan Pavilion makes it a point to be thorough in its investigation before making any arrests. Before I came, I made several inquiries into the background of Shizun Peak's several inquiries into the background of Shizun Peak's master Mo Zongshi. Her almond eyes were cold as she regarded Moran, red lips parting around her next words. These inquiries unearthed a rather complicated web of connections between this Mo Zongshi and a long cold case in Xiangtan. Excuse? I'm nervous. Everyone exchanged confused glances. "What long cold case?" someone asked. But Moran had gone pale, his palms clammy with sweat. He never expected this to come back to haunt him. Mu Yanli cast a cold glance over the man kneeling in the front of the hall, her words falling like an executioner's axe. "Wu Xianjun, let's cut to the chase. You and I both know what happened in your past. Would you like to confess to it yourself, or shall I call in the witnesses?" Moran closed his eyes. I'm assuming he maybe killed someone who harmed his mother. That's all I can think of. But it just doesn't add up to me. I don't know. We'll see. Moran closed his eyes. In the early days after he'd just been reborn, he'd known that if he truly wanted to live freely, there were certain people he would need to get rid of, or he'd risk regretting it later. At the time, he'd had neither power nor opportunities to do so. Later, when he'd had both the power and the opportunity, he was no longer inclined to take another's life for his own selfish reasons. After all, in the past life, he'd killed more than his fair share of people, either to conceal his past or to keep bargaining chips in his hands. Mo Yanli spoke into his silence. It appears Mo Zongshi does not wish to confess. Undisguised scorn twisted the cold beauty of her features. Shaking out her sleeves, she turned to face the crowd. Her voice was bell-clear, resonating through the crush of assembled cultivators. "Then it falls to me. Heed my words. Before this famed Zongshi entered Shizun Peak, he had already taken more than a dozen lives. This vile, despicable monster should have long been brought to justice." "What? He killed a dozen people before even entering the sect?" "Ge?" Shimeng's eyes were wide with shock. Though his voice wasn't loud, it reached Mo Yanli's ears. She glanced over at the young master of Shizun Peak and said mildly, "Guh." Shimeng did not reply. The sleeting rain pelted down outside, the skies overhead growing darker and darker, until even the candlelight within the hall was not enough to lift the chokingly oppressive atmosphere. The contempt that filled Mo Yanli's gaze when it rested on Moran turned to cold mockery when she looked upon Shimeng. Look, I will unfortunately allow frustration from people towards Moran, but take your taunting eyes off of Shimeng. This boy has done nothing. Her lips were like two sunset-stained clouds as she said, "Mistaking killer for kin? Truly, young Master Shu is to be pitied." Well, that happiness over a shared name between this woman and one of my beloved untamed Model Zushi characters died a swift death. Shimeng had no idea what she meant, yet the words crackled through him like a lightning strike, reverberating in his skull. He stumbled back, eyes growing wider still. What do you mean? Mistaking killer for kin? His entire body shook with fine tremors. What nonsense are you? Mo Yanli turned away, losing interest in him. Mo Ye is not Xu Zhangmen's nephew. In fact, she paused, her pitiless gaze slicing like a dagger across Xu Jingyong and Madame Wang's faces. Her voice rang with both righteousness and cruelty. 8 years ago, Xu Zhangmen's real nephew was slain by Moran. That's a horrible cliffhanger, but that is where we're ending it because that's the end of the chapter and we only have 10 minutes left. And frankly, I kind of need a break. I'm terrified. I so badly do not want this to be true, but because of Moran's reaction, I think it is, which I just don't want to think about at all. I have so many thoughts and at the same time my head feels so empty. Okay, yeah, well, I'm sorry to end it 10 minutes early, but I would rather end it at the end of a chapter than randomly in the middle of one, especially because it sounds like the next bit is gonna be quite heinous to read. So, yeah. I will see you guys again next week. Tuesday, sorry. I'm debating. No, scratch that. I was about to say I'm debating doing 2 times a week at this time, but then I realized I really can't. So we're just sticking to the 1 time a week for now. Same time next week. And yeah, I don't have hope that we're gonna have a easier time next week. It sounds like this is just gonna be continuous pain. Weirdly enough, I almost want to go back to Chuaning and whatever the hell is happening with him and Shimei, because and I say that and then we're gonna get it and I'm gonna wish we were back with Moran. I don't like Meatbun knows how to torment us, that's all I can say. I hope you guys still enjoyed and otherwise I'll see you guys again next week. Zaijian.